Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salam, hello, peace to you all, and welcome to a special impromptu edition of Office Hours. This is Office Hours 40. 3 cheers for hollow anti-imperialism. Hip, hip, hooray, hip, hip, hooray, hip, hip, hooray. I hope you all are well. You must have been also kind of noticing, if you're as online as I am, about the recent X, Instagram, and all other social media storm about a recently published open letter from Thursday, August 20th, entitled "To Iran's Political Prisoners Trapped," quote, I don't know what they're quoting, it's bizarre, quote, "between two blades of a scissors." And it's labeled as an open letter with the subheadline, "On one side, you face the domination of the Islamic Republic." Ooh, grr, shivers. "On the other, the imperialist forces that Republic claims to stand against." Okay, so here to break this down with me, doing close textual analysis because he is a former or recovering literary scholar. It is the host of the Unbanned, Banned and Unbanned. The East is a podcast, and my producer for this program, Sina Rahmani, and we're streaming also on his revived, restored channel, The East is a Podcast. So welcome to you all, and welcome to Sina. Sina, it's great to have you on.
Hi, Adnan. This is fun. This has been a whirlwind. I've been traveling, and I'm back at my house, and then this pops up, and you can't even have a weekend without like some hectic Iran related stuff. I have a lot to say. It's still kind of unfolding, all this drama, because as these things usually go, the characters themselves are beginning to disavow the existence of this letter. We should actually begin with reading the letter itself. It is because there's some people who aren't as online as we are, as you said, who might not have seen it. It was published. I was Thursday nights. Yeah. So Friday morning is when I started noticing, like, what? And there's so many of these projects now. Like, there's so, and then I was like, what is this? The Collective for Iran, Collective for Democratic Iran is the group who's behind it. They don't have many posts on their Instagram page. That's the only socials I could find. If people in the chat know of other ones, but yeah, we should begin by reading this letter, because some people are lucky enough to not have to follow this stuff 24/7. So we should. That's kind of our job. Do you want to read it?
Yeah. I mean, we had a request from a listener in the chat. Hi, Qism AAC8T. Please read the letter in funny voices. So I don't know if I'm quite up for that, but I'm happy to begin. And we can. Do you want to read it through and then go back over it, or should we stop at points to deal with items that come up? What do you think? I mean, it's not that long, so we could just read it through. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's not that long. We can read it.
Okay, so the start of this says, "August marks the anniversary of the 1988 mass executions in Iran, a horror that echoes in the country's current surge in death sentences. It also marks the 19 August anniversary of the UK and US orchestrated coup against the Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh in 1953. Amid the current indiscriminate waves of U.S.-Israeli military assaults against Iran, this letter of solidarity denounces the repression of the Iranian people and their political prisoners by forces both at home and abroad. To our fellow activists, students, thinkers, workers, artists, and other prisoners of conscience held behind the walls of all detention centers across Iran. We write to you from a place of deep solidarity, our hearts heavy with the knowledge of the struggle you face within Iran's prisons, the torture, the systematic neglect, the enforced silence, and the brutal reality of sham trials and executions. As former and current political prisoners, activists, and scholars committed to the global project of abolition, anti-authoritarianism, and anti-imperialism, we see you across the distances of geography and the silences of censorship and internet blackouts. And we stand in solidarity with you as you are at the intersection of two sources of oppression. On one side, you face the Islamic Republic that from its inception enforced absolute social and political control based on an exclusionary ideology. It is a system that claims to counter imperial power while using its very logic of domination and systems of carcerality, torture, and execution. On the other side, you face the aggression and violence of the very imperialist and Zionist forces the Islamic Republic purports to stand against. The U.S. and Israel instigate brutal wars, destroy civilian infrastructure, kill innocent schoolgirls, and treat you as collateral damage in their pursuit of regional dominance. We remember the horror of the 23rd June 2025 when Israel struck the Evin prison complex, flattening its hospital ward, transgender section, and visitor center. You best exposed this dual oppression when you voiced that you, quote, feel stuck between the two blades of a scissors, the evil regime that imprisons and tortures you, and a foreign force dropping bombs on your heads in the name of freedom, unquote. In the past year, we witnessed both blades of the scissor sharpen. We see the arbitrary arrests and the horrific wave of state executions. We see the deepening criminalization of the working class and unemployed, the targeting of Kurds, Arabs, and Baluch, and the scapegoating of Afghan migrants, all desperate attempts to kill the spirit of people they cannot contain. This is the logic of carceral states everywhere. When they fail to address the crises people face, they simply attempt to criminalize or disappear the people themselves. We see the same logic of domination when Israel uses, quote, administrative detention, unquote, to hold Palestinian political prisoners for years without charge. We see it when Israeli authorities celebrate a new law that allows them to execute the Palestinian political prisoners they cannot dominate. We see it in the ICE detention centers where the U.S. government imprisons our people in the pursuit of a political agenda of racist exclusion or detains our political activists for daring to speak against the U.S.-backed Israeli genocide. We see it in the history of the U.S. targeting freedom fighters, particularly Black, Indigenous, Puerto Rican, and other anti-colonial organizers, locking them away for decades to crush movements for national liberation and sovereignty. And we see the connections between these carceral systems sharing intelligence and governance techniques, such as when the USP Marion prison in Illinois became a blueprint for prisons built in Iran and Israel in the 1960s. Whether it is a border wall or a prison gate, the goal is the same: to silence people through fear, domination, and isolation. Your struggle is as global as our collective dreams of freedom and dignity. We stand with you and we reject the false binary of imperialism and hollow anti-imperialism. We invite global civil society and anti-imperialist activists and organizations to extend their unconditional support and solidarity to all incarcerated kin fighting for our collective liberation, to build relationships with Iranian political prisoners and uplift their voices, to put pressure on the Islamic Republic by challenging its narrative, and to call upon that government to immediately stop all the executions and free all political prisoners. The Iranian authorities must stop their inhumane practice of death and incarceration now, and the U.S. and Israel must end their barbaric wars and brutal sanctions that knowingly devastate our communities. In solidarity and with love, should I read the signatories?
Oh no, it's fine. There's
Yeah.
just
We'll go back over who are the
we'll-
signatories in a bit. Okay, so that's the letter that was published in the Guardian on Thursday, the 20th, and that, because of the time difference and things, I think many of us started to see coming through on Friday, right?
Yeah.
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 Okay, so where do we start with this mess?
Where do we start? I think at the outset, this is kind of how I'm reading this. Sorry, my dog's barking. So we are in a strange moment for the U.S. empire, right? Completely defeated at the hands of Iran, completely humiliated. A strategy sort of first float, sort of. I mean, this is basically the moment we're in is like Kissinger's demise. I mean, the guy is dead, but his policy of kind of surrounding the ethno-state with a ring of kind of vassal states and fighting proxy wars. Obviously, Iraq War 1 and 2 were a little bit of a blip on this strategy, but at the end of the day, we've had a sort of U.S. That's unleashed a very powerful wave of violence, a sort of swath of violence across this region. And here's the reality is that there's been very little pushback from the intellectual class of the U.S. The intellectual class of the U.S. is largely not just, not resistant, but essentially endorse this violence without naming it as an endorsement. And this is and I'm not talking about these people, I'm talking about the majority of them, right? Because they don't say anything, they don't fight them. The liberals just kind of, if there is a kind of any kind of anti-war movement, people drop it the moment the word starts. And so it's not really there. And so these people on this list represent supposedly a kind of radical exception to the wider trend of liberal apolitical voices or liberal imperialist voices. They're not even apolitical, they're imperialist. We don't need to go over, basically. So that's kind of the moment. And so with the context of Iran, you also have another overlapping sort of or complicating factor in all this, which is the rise of the sort of rise of a comprador army, right? And so I've talked about this before, but essentially in the sort of let's say Westoid intellectual spheres, the respective ones, there's different ones, there's different linguistic spheres, but in the sort of Anglophone sphere, there is a wide swath of professional Iranian dissident voices. Okay, I put those in very skeptical quotation marks. Dissident voices who are Iranian have a disproportionate representation in U.S. academia, especially. But then disproportionate is kind of weird here because Iran is vastly overemphasized, and in a sense that, and it's not even overemphasized, it's a reflection of its priority to the American empire, that it does have this army of compradors. And this army of compradors has this function to be a kind of Iago into the ears of this radical, of the sort of few radical voices, right? So I've seen this in action, and I think this letter is a manifestation of that, where certain voices, and I have my suspicion as to who led this. I don't have any proof. It's just straight up, it was probably that person. Because of the only thing I'll hint to that is that I'm pretty sure this was a California person, partly because the nature of the names themselves are heavily California. There's a lot of sort of California people on this. I don't have proof, but I have my suspicions. I'm not going to articulate them. I mean, who cares if I did? But it's not like you can just say, I guess that this is a person. But I'm going to save that for later, and it might come out soon enough. But I think that
and I would say there, before you get on to the point, is also that we are both planning on being on what should be a very interesting and informative discussion live stream on Millennials Are Killing Capitalism on Tuesday, which will include people like Jared Ball, a bunch of others, and of course Jay of Millennials is doing actually, I think, some deep dives to try and kind of suss out. And so I think there's other investigators and people who are looking into this. I think by then we're going to have a little bit more information about who was really initiating this, who drafted it, who was reaching out to try and bring signatories, on board. And that will also give us some, more insight about kind of what's going on in the sort of deep background. So do tune in on Millennials Are Killing Capitalism on Tuesday, midday, I think 11.
It's 11 a.m. Yeah.
I'll be joining a little late because I have got the Gaza student course. And I did want to say, because I didn't get a chance to say at the outset, is I've put the link in the chat and in the description of our fundraiser for this course online for students in Gaza. We're trying to raise funds for student projects. And also there's going to be this fall an in-person version at American University in Cairo for displaced Gaza students who are in Cairo. Okay, so we have expenses and things related to mounting the course there at American University in Cairo. Please be generous. We're trying to raise a few thousand to make that possible for those who will have an in-person experience. Okay, but you were about to say, after you were talking about, kind of broadly where this seems to come out from, but...
Yeah, I do want to, before I say I do want to say something very funny in all of this, which is, this is a letter to Iranians, okay? I want you to I want you to see not just in English. It's also in German and in Arabic.
Yeah.
Although
not in Farsi, interestingly.
Oh no, maybe it's not. I actually haven't looked at it. Maybe it is actually.
Is that Farsi?
I take that back. Yes. Is there an English version? Okay,
yeah, that's Farsi. That's Farsi.
That's the Farsi one.
It's in Farsi.
Someone said Arabic. I didn't actually look at it. It is Farsi. My apologies. So there is a German, Farsi, and an Arabic one. This is they did go through the hassle of writing all this. So I will say that. However, this is very funny. Look at this collective for a democratic Iran. This is a highly active project that has a wide base of support. I mean, they have upwards of 6 posts. 6 posts, folks, 3 of which are translations of this atrocious letter. One is a post about something. I mean, it's a joke. This org has no basis in reality. It is purely just the kind of like stand up, whatever. It's just a kind of placard or like whatever kind of thing. Cut out, exactly. It's like a org. And it's just there's so many of these in the Iranian context. I can't even keep track of them. But I kind of like what I was saying earlier is that this strange moment that we're in is really a crisis moment for the Gusano Iranians. I mean, that's my term for them, but really they call it like sort of neutral ways like diaspora, dissident, whatever voices. Is that because what's happened in the last 8 months, Iran has done something that the world thought was unthinkable. Iran defeated the U.S. empire, destroyed the basis of its power, dialed back the extreme arrogance and violence that the U.S. has been able to throw at a vast swath of reason just because of destroying the bases. I mean, this is one of the great moments in anti-imperialist history. And these people want us to believe, and they use a bunch of names, whoever wrote this, use their influence over these people who are most of whom have never said much about Iran, who have no influence on Iranians. Iranians would not know who Bernardine Dohrn is. Most Americans don't know who Bernardine Dohrn is. I mean, these are boomer dinosaurs. And I'm not being ageist here, but I'm just reflecting the fact that this is representative of a class of people who are aging out of relevance, who have been shouted over and largely put into a corner because of what? Because Zionist platform Pahlavoid fashos over them. So what happened was they've been slowly marginalized. I mean, not slowly, very much marginalized, where for decades and decades they enjoyed this privileged position as like the sort of liberal face of Iranian dissidents. And that became like a kind of thing because now Pahlavoids have taken such a front seat, and of course they're mouth-frothing fascists who don't talk in this vernacular. They don't care. They don't go through this stuff. So I'm seeing a deep desperation here with this letter. I'm seeing I'm seeing an update on. So we should talk into who has been taking their names off of this, but
No,
we'll get to that in a
another
second.
topic.
Yeah, that's another.
not
But it's a
even a second.
reflective.
That's
It's a
much later.
reflective. It's a reflective of the fact that this letter was written by amateurs, was not, or at least in the sense that like the power that this class of people once enjoyed and influenced is rapidly fading away. And I believe that this is a desperate attempt to police people's speech. Now, this is the primary job of the Iranian left diasporoid. I mean, the right diasporoids police it too, but they police it in their own way, which is like, we're going to kill you and rape you. Like, that's what they do. They just scream at you and they say, we're going to kill you and rape you. We're going to scream. And that's like what they do. That's like their primary MO. I get very little of it because I'm not a woman and I'm not in a position of sort of professional prominence. Like I'm just some rando with a podcast, so they leave me alone largely. However, I have experienced this policing to the point where during the January stuff, I had a strange actor come out of the blue, get my contact from a friend, proceed to pretend to befriend me, and I knew what was happening. And I said, you know, I was like, okay, and basically ensure that I wasn't gonna wander away from the prescribed line. And then the person, after listening to my initial episode, was like, oh, I'm so relieved. And then they disappeared off the face of the earth. Never hear them again. I did have them reach out to one of the podcast hosts of shows I produce and try to push a guest. It was a very strange set of events. I was like, this is like the show I produce and you're trying. Anyways, there was a very strange occurrence. And it was like people, leftoids, like the leftoid class of Gusanos know me by now, and they know that I won't be bullied at any way. They know that it just won't work. It'll make me scream louder. So in that juncture, I was noticing something interesting that like, oh, the leftoids kind of have, they started pulling on the rope of 50 billion dead, 50 trillion dead, 100 trillion souls lost, gunned down, stabbed to death, you know, like the atrocity porn. And I noticed that, but those rightoids quickly took over. They quickly took over, and it didn't help that, remember, this was also right after the assassination of Martyr Khamenei. We also had a vast campaign of a vast psyop dedicated to one man, actually. I mean, this is probably history's first psyop for one guy, which was for Trump, and it was like sexy Iranian women dancing for him in the style that he dances, and having all of these freaks saying, thank you, Uncle Trump. Thank you, Uncle Bibi. Like, this was a psyop precisely for them, for him, and to thank, you know, the Zio class that were launching this war, right? So like the chain of events is important, right? So in December they start the currency crisis. It was some fuckery happened to get us to that point where the crisis really fell. So naturally it resulted in protests. Those protests at one turn took an extremely violent turn that had never really been seen on this scale before. Everybody was pulling on that rope, and everybody in terms of the Gusanos, left, right, they were pulling on the atrocity porn rope. But what happened is that they kind of sort of went into quiet, and they went into a kind of occlusion, the lefty side, because they understood that they had no, compared to the rightoids, compared to the Pahlavoids, they had no real influence over this. I actually disagree with that, but we'll talk about that later with the comment you just posted, but that's later. I think at the end of the day, they receded from that because they realized there was no real benefit for them to pull on the atrocity porn because since Iran really shut down those violent ISIS attacks, and I will say it again, that was a nationwide ISIS attack, and anyone who tells you that was some protest massacre of innocent protesters is lying to you. And so they kind of pulled back. And I watch a lot of them. I know a lot of them. I follow a lot of them. Some of them are my erstwhile friends. And I noticed that, it's like, they're taking a step back from all of this, and they're not participating so much in what's happening, because I think the writing was on the wall, and especially given the fact that the violence died so quickly, that the Iranian state reacted, and really what you can say
I don't
is
think it was even the Iranian state as much as Iranian society. Like,
yes,
at
that
least
too,
the
yeah.
people who don't, want their their state to collapse in chaos and to be subject to violence, fragmentation, breaking up of the country. And people in the region have been watching the developments that have taken place in West Asia and North Africa as a consequence of the U.S. sponsored and NATO wars, over the last 30 to 40 years. And they know the example of Libya. They know the example of Syria. And you're not going to accomplish your political goals by achieving them with the specter of extreme, Takfiri style violence. That has people are horrified by that. And Iranian society came out into the streets on Monday, January 12th, and it was over. Once that happened, in the millions, the streets were taken back purely by the courage and solidarity and kind of, support of people. Maybe they might have all of their economic, questions and concerns and problems that they're suffering and critiques of policies of the government. But compared to what they witnessed in 2-3 days of nihilistic violence, of destroying infrastructure, of murdering nurses, of, just tearing apart the very fabric of society and order, they said, no, we don't want that. And whether they were big supporters of the government or not, they came out en masse and basically suppressed. Those movements could not operate in the streets. And as a result, they developed the techniques that would be used for the subsequent Ramadan war, right? To prevent any kind of political subversion or use of proxy groups, or to try and foment the overthrow or collapse of the Islamic Republic's government by just taking over the streets. So, of course, there was a response by the government. Look, the IRGC was ready right away with responses within 8 hours, or within just momentarily, they were ready to fire back, right? So, of course, the government was ready. But what really, I think, was decisive was the fact that they tried to accomplish this through this subversion and by sponsoring and using nihilistic Takfiri-style violence, and people rejected it in horror.
Yeah, and remember too that part of the lessons of these regime change operations, right, is you need a highly spectacular form of violence. Okay, so it wasn't just that they got Iranians to go out on the street and murder their fellow citizens. It wasn't just as bad as that. Is that they encouraged them to film it. They encouraged them to, and because they're tapping in now to the sort of Zoomer genome, which is like, film everything you do, take your phone with you and film yourself and proudly stand for photos, because they needed those photos to manufacture the image of a revolution. And my theory has always been that this was supposed to go on for weeks, is that those ISIS attacks were supposed to go on for weeks and weeks. And then the pinnacle, the sort of curtains up moment, was going to be the assassination of Khamenei. And that didn't work out. And that ended. And the fact that the Iranian state was able to use the sort of widespread usage of Starlink, right? Because remember, if you're in a revolution, why are you on the internet? Isn't that the first thing that you do, is that you realize, okay, the internet is not The internet is like someplace else, and what I need is to be local here, right? So if you're trying to have a revolution, why would you post about it? Why would you live stream it? But of course, the logic is you need to show the revolution first. The revolution will first be televised, and it will then turn into an actual revolution. And that's how the model of this works. So there's video of like the original astroturfed Iranian revolution, which is the overthrow of Mossadegh, the coup, which is there was like British Pathé had a whole thing, Persian revolt or whatever, right? And so like this was supposed to be an updated version of that. And in our years and in this moment, we provide the images ourselves. You don't have to have a professional cameraman. You have all these videos. So one video that was going around, for instance, so yeah, the nihilistic point. One video that was going around was this guy who had a flamethrower, who was using a flamethrower against these cops on a motorbike. Now, of course, there's an interesting element to all this. If you watch that video, the woman recording it from her apartment keeps saying "Mashallah, Mashallah, Mashallah." Now, I've watched that video a ton of times now, just because it's popped up. And there is a trick that they pulled from the days of Syria, which is take videos and add an audio track on top of that, right, to make it look like, oh, okay, so either that was an original video that they got a hold of, or whoever was actually doing it just had the video and then they put this soundtrack. Anyways, the point is to show that that the violence on the street is supported in this popular way, right? And I remember those nights. There's a funny story of one of those nights in the middle of all this. I was like, I remember I remember going to get a pizza somewhere, and it was like I was picking up pizza, and of course the news was on. It was like Iranians protesting in the streets, blah blah blah, and I was like, here we go again. But but the fact that this didn't go to script is one of the big reasons why the war wasn't able to sustain itself. So I find that, to take it back to this letter and stuff, is that this letter is a symptom of the fact that they have no idea how to handle the fallout of how effective the Iranian state was able to not only dial back the sort of dirty operations, whatever there were, but also fight a successful war of defense against the imperialist forces. So this letter is an attempt to police a certain class of reader, right? A Guardian reader, right? Which is a dwindling class. It's an aging class, but also fewer and fewer people take this stuff. I mean, think about it, guys. They just finished lynching this poor guy, Jason Arde. And now they're going to convince you with their horrible articles, with like chasing this man down and sacrificing him to the gods of boomer rage and rage bait. Like they sacrificed this man, and now they're going to turn around and tell you that they're weeping for Iranian transgender in jail. I mean, it's so ludicrous. A class of people who have no influence over any of this. So really, it's not a letter to the Iranian people. It's a letter to the Anglophone readers of The Guardian and whoever sees this, to police your opinion. Say, oh, don't think too much about this. Now, remember, because in the background of all this, the world is seeing what Iran did. So now let's look at an actual world leader, an actual man of consequence, a man who has actually fought revolutions, and what he has to say. Evo Morales tweeted this this morning. Translated, this is the Spanish translation. Iran is an example of a people's dignity in the face of the empire. Its sovereign technological development made it possible to reduce the enormous military asymmetry. Its people resisted in unity the psychological war and disinformation, and its strategic planning responded to the financial and economic pressure of the U.S. The empire can impose sanctions, threats, and wars, but it cannot subdue the will of a sovereign people, because while it wears itself out in wars of arms, Iran demonstrates that sovereignty can also win the economic war. I mean, this is a man who has actually waged war against empire. This is a man they cooed him. They killed his poor dog. They ran over with the tank. They chased him out of his house. He was almost assassinated. I mean, this man is legit, and he's telling you Iran is the leader here. Iran is doing all this. I mean, this to me is the worst case scenario four left imperialists who wrote this letter, who circulated it among their friends, and as it turns out, basically did a little bit of, we say colaverdari, like hat stealing of all of this, which is like they kind of pulled a number over the writers, who are now turning around and saying, oh, I didn't see how this looked. I didn't see. I'm going to mute you from your typing. I didn't see this letter or whatever. So now, I don't know if you want to get into this, Adnan, should we talk about who has, because there's the continued fallout of this letter.
I thought you were going to go into a closer textual analysis.
Oh, we should.
As
yes,
a literary scholar.
Yes,
well, why?
actually,
now it's like we've kind of gone beyond it.
I know,
in a way,
we should.
But,
I will say
there
this.
is a lot in it that actually is worth kind of, because some of these points that they're using here will be used in propaganda, disinformation, psy-war. And let's be clear, I think one thing that has to be pointed out is why now? Why is this happening now? There have been many, but why did this one get such a prominent place in Guardian and so forth? And I think, of course, it has to do with the fact that we have just seen over the course of this month the running aground of the political, kind of diplomatic and military campaign of the U.S. Israeli effort, right? And they are themselves announcing that they're going to shift because, as we've said, as Justin has said on this, on the show with you and me together, is only Iran can defeat Iran. They have figured that out. It's not possible to defeat them, the United States, through its military might or through its attempt to, create diplomatic conditions that would constrain and isolate Iran and prevent it from being able to survive and flourish and defeat the U.S. and Israeli effort. So they are shifting specifically to economic war, which is what Evo Morales is wisely pointing out is also not going to work, but it is what touched off the manipulations of Iran's currency, the increase in sanctions, the economic war of the United States is what touched off the original protests that could then be subverted, hijacked, etc. So that is more dangerous in some ways for Iran. They have recognized that because they failed to achieve any of their goals politically through military and diplomatic assault upon Iran. It just hasn't worked. So they're moving to economic strangulation in a new kind of phase. And of course, in accompanying that is trying to stoke, like they had before, some of these grievances within Iran by campaigning also about how horrible the regime, is of the Islamic Republic, and use psychological disinformation to promote political subversion within, Iran and outside Iran in the solidarity movement that has not been strong enough in the way that, say, the Palestine solidarity movement has at least coalesced a kind of coherence and campaign, but is building because people see the horrible economic effects, the unjustness of this war, and because of Iran's own successes in the psychological war, in the soft power. The collapse of U.S. soft power is being confronted by Iran being able to make its case, which is why this letter says the narrative, Iran's narrative. This is what they are attempting to puncture because Iran has promoted very successfully a narrative of anti-imperialist solidarity on behalf of the oppressed around the world, okay, for Gaza, for the people of Cuba, for the people of Venezuela, that they are doing something on behalf of resistance against the empire. That's part of the narrative that is powerful now, around the world, and this is specifically designed to try and disrupt, interrupt, and divide the, building pro-Iran, solidarity movement. Just the same way that the, Syria kind of situation was used specifically at a point where the pro-Palestine solidarity movement was beginning to put pressure on international institutions with the ICJ case, with, building kind of support with more of these flotillas, etc. And even if those were derailed and were not as effective as they could have been, they were built upon a broadening kind of Palestine solidarity campaign. And what did the Syria situation do? It divided that community that then collapsed into discussions about and recriminations and trying to police. This is exactly coming back to the point that you were making before, to police the expressions of Palestine solidarity that took an anti-imperialist frame by saying, no, you have to, celebrate the end of the Assad government, the Assad regime. You have to, and that, this is, something that was a priority for their people. So even if you critiqued what this would do for the Palestine, from a material perspective of being able to support the Palestinian resistance, Syria was important. They prevented people from talking about the costs that this would have for Palestine by saying, no, you have to be in favor and celebrate the poor people of Syria. And this is, what is happening here is exactly the same parallel kind of thing, which is why this talks about the purported anti-imperialism of Iran, the hollow anti-imperialism, the, fact that there is a narrative that's out there. And so this is this kind of like we are waging against this, kind of supposed hollow, confused anti-imperialist narrative that you shouldn't believe. The real anti-imperialism is being a U.S., kind of global, academic celebrity and pontificating about things now, which you never really discussed before. They mention, we should, in a very small way, we should end the barbaric wars and brutal sanctions that knowingly devastate our communities. When has a single one of these people been on a petition demanding the end of sanctions on Iran? Okay?
Exactly.
This is what's ridiculous about this group, which is why I said, why are they taking the time at this moment, to intervene in such a way where they have abdicated all the responsibilities that would have gone with a genuine anti-imperialist stance, which is to say, let's end this war. Where is the anti-war movement in the United States? These people who signed this letter, their taxes are funding the war. On Iran. What have they said about that before this moment? And secondly, when over the past 47 years, but let's say just in the last, few months, when did they ever put forward a petition saying we demand the end of these unilateral, illegal sanctions upon Iran, right? They haven't done that. So, let's take a look if there's other kind of points that you wanted to bring up of the misinformation that needs to be debunked. What did you see as needing addressing in this?
Well, there's the whole thing. There's a bunch of shit in this, and it's also like it tells you who the audience is for this. So there's the thing about in the past year we witnessed both blades of the scissors sharpen. We see the arbitrary arrests and wait, I thought both blades. Wait, what? Okay, whatever. In the past year, we witnessed both blades of the scissors sharpen. We see the arbitrary arrests and the horrific wave of state executions. Okay, we see we see the deepening criminalization of the working class and unemployed, the targeting of Kurds, Arabs, and Baloch, and the scapegoating of Afghan migrants. Like this stuff, this whole thing, this is classic regime change, like basic one thing, because they're like, Iran is just as racist as Israel. It's an ethno-state for Persians that uses violence against these minorities. Okay, yes. It's funny. It's like, wait, what's the biggest minority in Iran? Azeri Turks? Like they don't care about Azeri Turks. It's like half the government. I mean, Khamenei himself, I think, is an Azeri Turk. I mean, I have to double check that, but this is not like Iran's multi-ethnic character is reflected in the Iranian state. I'm pretty sure Ghalibaf is Kurdish. I'm pretty sure. I have to check that, but Iran's ethnic makeup and its ability to defend itself, if Iran were the racist ethno-state that these people claim, because this is the basic thing. They want to make Iran the same thing as the US. They want to make it the same thing as things. So all the things that you think are bad in the US, they also transpire in Iran. And this is the game that they play, right? And so one thing that they brought up was the transgender wing of the Evin thing. So Vera Amali, who's fantastic.
This was a great piece.
Yeah, she tweeted about this. She actually did her thesis on HIV in Iran. She said, she's a great tweet. She said, much has already been written about the hypocrisy of hypocrisy of this letter, but one claim deserves particular attention. The authors repeat the story that Israel struck, quote, the transgender section of Evin prison, purportedly housing 100 transgender prisoners. This false story circulated internationally after it was reported by the NYT before later investigations found no evidence to support it, and the key source denied ever making this claim attributed to him.
Yeah.
So the tweet goes on, having spent my PhD years researching HIV in Iran, a subject that necessarily involves studying the legal, social, and healthcare realities facing transgender people, I know full well that transgender people are not imprisoned in Iran for being transgender. Iran illegally recognizes transgender people and permits gender reassignment surgery. Furthermore, there are no dedicated prison wings housing 100 transgender prisoners. Yet people who are willing to uncritically repeat such an implausible story and now writing open letters to Iranian prisoners are as though they possess a deep understanding of the people they claim to write to. It is another reminder how often narratives about Iran are constructed from assumptions and secondhand mythologies rather than from serious engagement with realities on the ground. I mean, so the thing is, then you have to think, like, so this is the people who wrote this letter have like a set of lies, or for them it's like, oh, that's what I know, right? So they just feign ignorance. But it's like a bunch of things that they say that, the things they try to hit every single note that means something to liberals. So, minorities, that includes sexual minorities, right? And like that includes these people that and another thing that they do, and so this is like a standard tactic. It's so nakedly obvious that they also name like a few minorities in Iran, ethnic minorities, but then as if the Iranian state is the racist ethno-state that the US and like as if it even comes to approach that. I mean, it's so insulting to
That's
Iranians.
The equivalence point. I mean, this is
a society built upon genocide. I mean, compare it to the U.S., a society built upon the mass extermination of millions of indigenous people, and then
the mass enslavement
of millions more African people, and then a civil war fought basically because some side were like, maybe we shouldn't enslave them. Let's just disempower them. Another said, no, we have to enslave them. So they fought one of the biggest, most violent conflicts of the 19th century just over that, right? Just over that point. And then they proceed to erect a centuries now. Wait, Jim Crow is like, what? Almost 200 years. Which hasn't ended
to 1960s. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's as if it ended, right? But then it was like this, as
it's
if
more
right? Like
segregated. They've understood that the school system they did a study in the 2000s was more after 50 years since the Brown versus the Board of Education 1955 Supreme Court decision desegregating the schools. They were more segregated in point of fact in 2005 than they were in 1955.
And then on top of that, after the economic crash of 2008, even more so, right? Because that's the basis of the American state, is racialization, and white supremacy is in the very genome of the American state. So they want to say the same thing about Iran, except it's Persian supremacy. This, to me, it just drives me so insane. It's like, how do you hate your own people so much that you equate them to the most evil? I mean, forget the U.S. for a second, and then to compare it to Israel, the most racist ethno-state to ever exist, a state that has perfected racism into its legal and juridical core, that also uses its own religious institutions to then whitewash that racism and to amplify. I mean, come on, guys, this is ridiculous. Like, we are in hell if you really think that Iran is the same. So that was something. And then another thing was the standard thing of 1988 mass executions of political prisoners.
Yes, yes. I mean,
The
this is
original atrocity porn this is their generation's atrocity porn. So over years, what I've noticed is that with Iran propaganda is that it gets updated for the next generation, and so but the same tactics apply. So atrocity porn. So they'll convince you that part of it, that a lot of these people who were killed, and the numbers they fly around again. And you look on the
those
Wikipedia page, they
numbers
do
are
the same
meant to
thing.
do they're meant to do only
Yes.
one thing, which is to equal or exceed, the scale of what is
Yes.
acknowledged
Yes.
in the casualties in Gaza. That's the only
Yes.
purpose for the
Yes.
80,000,
Yeah.
50,000 and they want to say, look, it happened in just like 2 days,
Yes.
in 3 days, and look at the scale. So it's worse. It's worse than Gaza. That's the only purpose of those numbers, is to try and have a negative comparison, from Israel's behavior, right? So
And yeah, and
again,
to
you can
equate them and
see
make them
that
all the same. Yeah. Yeah.
well, make them the same, or to give a pass in
Yep.
point of fact, because this letter does not go through the fact that the United States incarcerates more people than the rest of the world. I mean, it's the highest level of incarceration rates. There's so many things that are unique and specific to the U.S. as a racial state, as a settler colonial state, that they could have talked about here, but instead there's this principle that they use here of parity between Iran, as a ethno national, we should of course refer to our colleague and friend of the show, David Yagubian's book on nationalism in Iran, that makes the case that it is a different form of nationalism, that is a kind of civic nationalism of Iranianness, of participation in Iranian society and political culture, and not an ethnic kind of. You can have hyphenated Armenian Iranians. You can have Jewish Iranians. You can have, Arab Iranians. You can have Kurdish Iranians. You can still participate in the institutions, in the society, in civic life, etc., because your citizenship is not tied to your status as a Iranian ethnic, person. So this is important to understand, is that not all national kind of structures and not all states operate in the same way. There is a kind of I would say anarchist also strain in here as well, which is about how every state is carceral, they're authoritarian, and or even if it's not everyone, Iran is one of them, and so whatever criticisms that we might have about the carceral racial state in the United States. Well, look, Iran is a horrible, carceral regime as well, right? And it's this kind of idea that any institutions of public order, of law, like any of the responses that the Iranian state took up to try and protect people, civil infrastructure, during the case of the riots fomented by violent extremist, Takfiri Zionist operatives, is somehow horrible, because wielding power is a horror.
Yes.
And you should never have power. You should all just be these, in these affinity groups, and, kind of being local and democratic and all of that. And so the goal in many of these ways, in many of these projects, seems to be, you should dismantle this horrible, oppressive, evil state, that is facing Zio-American war, sanctions, economic, distress and pressure. You should dismantle the one institution that is there protecting the people and trying to maintain their sovereignty and achieve, some goals of, social advancement for the people and make provision for their needs. That should be dismantled, because the state is as oppressive as the U.S. empire, right? This is the equivalence that is being made, that patterns and frames all of this bankrupt sort of analysis, and is used constantly to subvert any state that defends its sovereignty, and even more so what Iran is doing. This is what's so threatening. is in fact attacking and dismantling and weakening, the Western Empire, not just in West Asia, but its capabilities and its capacities, on a global sort of scale. So,
Yeah.
I wonder,
No.
what else did you see in this letter before we turn to kind of other kind of levels of analysis? I wanted to get also to Helia.
So I want to
Mutali's
finish this point though on
Yeah.
so this is the thing is that like that what they'll so Iran, I showed this thing on the screen as you were talking. This the list of countries by incarceration rates. Iran is 51st. It's 51st on that list, and that was taken in 2020. There are routine mass pardonings in Iran. I think there was one during COVID too. And
Yeah.
the Iranian, like, no matter what you say about the Iranian state, it is not a carceral state the way the state that you and I live in and the way the US state is. It is just simply not. It wouldn't even work in the Iranian context. It wouldn't even function. Iran is a vast country. You can't just go out and create, you can't create a vast, a Gulag archipelago, whatever. But these are fictions that liberals tell themselves, and it's a continuation of anti-communism in a way. And it's also like Orientalism too, which is, big bad brown government kills innocent, democracy-loving thing. And the thing is that they're talking about what, in 1988, mass executions. My God, we're talking about the MEK. The MEK was allied with Saddam. They invaded the country and they lost. Look up Operation Mersad, okay? Operation Mersad was the last land battle between Iraqi and Iranian forces. It was a complete calamity. And who was a major force in that, which was the People's Mujahideen. The People's Mujahideen were like part of the Iranian Revolution and then broke with the revolution and then joined the enemies of Iran and waged a war. Guess what? When you lose a war and you wage a war against the state and you lose, your dudes are going to die. They're going to get sentenced to execution. Iran is not against the death penalty. You can debate that whatever you want, but this is for states that this is normal behavior for states. Killing people who seek out the death of that state is normal. Ask yourself what happened to the RAF guys, the Rota Armee Fraktion or whatever. They murdered them in jail, live. They did it live. They murdered them because those guys physically fought the German police, the West German police. We have a German in the talk who could probably say more about this. Alexander, basically they just killed them, straight up killed them. Whatever, I remember their names now. They called them the Baader Meinhof gang or whatever, right? But it was this radical. They sort of followed the Stadtguerilla thing, the urban guerrilla model. They started a war. They basically waged a war on the German state, and they said, like, in the hopes of sparking a larger uprising. They got caught. They were killed in prison. They weren't given a trial because guess what? Germany doesn't have. I'm pretty sure Germany doesn't have execution. West Germany didn't have death penalty, so they just did it themselves. They just killed themselves and whatever. So, like, this is not, like, the states killed their subjects who wage war on them. Like, there's a video of that American cop who's like, if you throw a Molotov cocktail, you will die. Like this is not abnormal behavior. Now, with that being said, in the context of an 8-year-long war, when you join the enemy, your genocidal enemy, remember, Saddam is using chemical weapons supplied by Germany, supplied by the West, paid for. Soviet Union helped him too. The whole world waged a war on Iran, and that government survived it. And guess what? There was a political reckoning. There was a disciplinary reckoning, which involved executions. You want to debate that? Go ahead. But I'm not crying over some traitors to the Iranian government who help our genocidal enemies. I don't mourn them at all. Now, here's another thing. I was in college and I watched a documentary, because there's a lot of these documentaries, because there's a lot of Iranian Gusanos who need careers, so they end up in the arts and academia, and they produce a ton of films and whatever, culture that Canadian state pays for. One of them is this movie, I remember it to this day, called The Tree That Remembers. And it's basically this kind of morose, sad story of this guy who commits suicide, and he was connected to the MEK stuff in the 80s and stuff. And in the movie, they say, 50,000 or 30,000 or some crazy number. I remember writing to Ervand Abrahamian. Okay, I was a young, not exactly pro-Islamic Republic guy. Okay, he laughed that number off. He said that's a massive overestimation. That's a massive exaggeration. It's somewhere in the. I can't remember. I wish I had the email. I don't have my McMaster email anymore. But at that time too, I noticed. I was like, is that number really true? And of course, to this day, People's Mujahideen is still doing its thing. A lot. I mean, they're all aged now. There's a whole story with them of being in Iraq and then getting chased out of Iraq in 2003. The American state called them terrorists for a while. Then they uncalled them terrorists, and then they forced them into Albania for some reason. So they're sitting in some compound outside of Tirana, where they're like forced to divulge every sexual thought they have. I mean, this is a fucked up cult. Their own leader disappeared suddenly. Masoud Rajavi, he just disappeared. No one knows where he went. He died somewhere in Iraq. He was never mourned. Like, it's a messed up place. And a lot of their workers, a lot of their martyrs are still, or at least their descendants are still in Iran. And a lot of them are involved with violence against the Iranian state. So one thing that happened was, just before all this went down, I think the assassination went down in like mid-February, there was a large organized attack on the leader's compound, the Beit Rahbari. I think it was upwards of 100 dudes. It was like a commando raid. It was upwards of like 100 dudes. And later on, after the fact, People's Mujahideen published the names of martyrs of this attack. It was a complete disaster. It was after the kidnapping of Maduro and his wife. And so they tried to do the same thing. They tried to have this crazy operation, and it didn't work. And their guys got slaughtered. The Iranian state was, of course, waiting for them, got slaughtered. It was a complete calamity. Remember, Iran, like Tehran, is in the middle of the country. It's not some coastal place where you can just do stuff. But so it's a complete disaster. So like the People's Mujahideen, the MEK, is not some neutral actor of innocence. This is a violent group who have waged war on the Iranian state. When you wage war on a state violently, that state uses its own immunity device, which is called state security, to fight back. This is normal. This is not out of the thing. You can debate it all you want, but it's just not happening. So the cliches of this article are just one after another. I suspect the person who wrote this is MEK. Because a lot of the left-wing part of it, and they've infiltrated, they've sort of coddled a lot of these voices. MEK is all over the place. It's not the only source of kind of left resistance to the Islamic Republic, but it's a loud and prominent one. And it's all kind of silly now, because at the end of the day, this is an older form. These people are aging out, and they have little and less to say. And a lot of them were the ones dancing and celebrating and twerking after February 28th. They would have protests and stuff. There was one in Toronto, a shameful one. My own family member attended it. I still can't believe it. I know, it's terrible. It's heartbreaking. But like at a certain point, you have to be a reasonable interlocutor and a critical thinker. And like, you can't just fall for the trap of, they kill innocents. Like, dude, this is not an innocent person. This is war, okay? This is a war, and parties wage war, and they use violence. And in the case of the Islamic Republic, a lot of their own guys die, and they celebrate them as martyrs, and that becomes a point of remembrance of, okay, if I take this job in the Basij, I could be killed. They just recently murdered this eulogist in an ISIS-style thing. And guess what? They filmed it the whole time. They had their phones on them. They cut out the guy's heart. They cut out the guy's liver or something to showed it to him, like what they did in Syria, in the hopes of terrorizing others. So this is the level of depravity on the part of some of these opponents to the Islamic Republic should not be minimized. And of course, the people who wrote this letter, who signed it, they don't care. Like, those Iranians don't deserve rights or life. Like, those Basij guys don't deserve life. And here's the final thing I'll say.
He was just a Quran reciter.
Yeah, just a Quran reciter.
Yeah, obviously wasting his life,
And then, who was doing this? The nasty Holly Digress. She was saying state-backed, eulogist. Guess who she works for? She works for YNAP, a Zionist Mossad front, and she's like a nasty, character, one of the dullest knives in that particular drawer. So of course she's been elevated upwards. But I remember in a tweet she said state-backed eulogist. So like even in Iran, it's what they're signaling to you is that it's fine if you murder anyone connected to the state. Those Iranians do not deserve life. They do not deserve human rights. And only we do. Only the innocent protester who is murdering his own compatriots with knives, and and they film it too. They film themselves doing it. I mean, this is
I think that's a really
farce.
interesting point about the interconnections between that grotesque, spectacular violence and its celebration that you see from Takfiris in Syria to these monarchists, to the glorification of horrific violence and the sadistic taking pleasure in it that we saw all throughout the social media of Israeli soldiers and people in civil society kind of celebrating the pain and violence towards the Palestinians. That's a real thread that links things like the people who celebrate these ICE raids or kids in cages. There are people who took joy from seeing kids in cages, right? So that's the kind of thread of this kind of sadistic, spectacular violence and celebrating it that links some of these extreme far-right sorts of groups. But I think the other side of it is also the impunity of Muslim lives. Anybody associated with the state is essentially, through their being a religious supporter of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and in the case of this figure, being a Quran reciter, which is why I think this was a very good observation, that it goes along with something that I've been saying throughout the Gaza genocide, and particular why it's been so difficult to mobilize an anti-war movement in the West against the Islamic Republic of Iran. It's because there is a role of Islamophobia, including Islamophobia on the left. It's a unique and particular kind of Islamophobia that I would say targets what is the most dangerous form of Muslim sovereignty. It's Muslims expressing sovereign political will that is seen as especially dangerous. Now, if it's just privatized religious performance that can be ignored or marginalized, but if it is transformed into an orientation for political resistance or for defending sovereignty or for asserting rights. We saw why some of the protests, when you have, people showing up for a million people showing up in the streets of London against the genocide in Gaza, and some of them are hijabi women. Oh my God, that is what is particularly disturbing, is the idea that there would be the assertion of political rights, the assertion of political positions in the public sphere by visibly Muslim people. That is really a problem for many, many, many people in the West, and I think it shows how even this compatible left is totally saturated, as Jim Garrison Keillor puts here, with Islamophobia. And there's also a willful ignorance about, Iran, Islamic culture, any of these things, and the deeper relationship of this tradition, present and previous to, confronting colonialism and imperialism, which is why I kind of pointed out that it's absolutely the case, and that I hope that one contribution of this special issue that I'm doing for PEN, and the PEN is my machete of the Anti-Imperialist Scholars Collective, is to, on Islam and anti-imperialism, is to address and confront precisely this problem, because there's so much at stake in that is deforming our politics of solidarity. Like, we cannot be effective if we're hampered by this insane bigotry that is latent and sometimes overt, even in our kind of resistance groups or in the left, etc. We need to overcome this, and so let's hope we can do something with that. But let's turn to the people who are being criticized in these, who are the signatories. And I want to ask you, like, we should look at some of these folks and what's going on here, but also the fact that there really weren't. Even if it was perhaps produced by like an MEK operative, it's interesting that there weren't major figures of the Iranian intellectuals in the diaspora, who were present on this signatory list. Where is, some of these people who, have been kind of very vocal or public about their criticisms, both of the U.S. war, but also sometimes of the Iranian government and of the Islamic Republic of Iran. It's interesting, and I wonder if it's because the diaspora has been so odious, that there's no like role for them because of their extreme pro-Zionism. Like they're not credible, the ones who've gotten a lot of attention in the public imagination, that there really isn't much space. And those who were, maybe have some criticism, of the Islamic Republic, nonetheless could see that this is a really hopeless and inappropriate, kind of attack on, at this moment on the Islamic Republic of Iran, and just decided, well, we don't want to be associated with it. I don't know. It's very interesting that there are very few Iranian scholars and academics and political activists who were recruited or agreed to be signatories on this. So that's the first kind of question. The rest is, what about these people who are on the list?
Well, I think at the outset, this was a list to say that this was a solidarity of outsiders list, that this is a list, as we said earlier, like first and foremost for a kind of Anglophone, left liberal audience. It's not actually for Iranians. So like but the performance of public solidarity is now, and then circulated through these letters. This is a holdover of Cold War stuff and of like an earlier age, right? So I have a kind of global critique of this as like a literary guy, but some of the names on here, we should also talk about the fact that the letter is melting away like a hot fudge sundae in the Georgia sun. Like it's amazing. Like a Robin Kelly has taken his name off. We
should show that video. That is like unbelievable.
I don't know. I feel bad. I feel embarrassed watching it. The sound is so poor. But yes, it's actually. I mean, I can't as a good producer have that play. But there's a second thing in all of this, which is like, look at the names, right? So a lot of them are boomers. That's what you should look at initially. These are boomer heavyweights. Judith Butler, Bill Ayer, and heavyweight radical boomers, okay? And sort of vacillate, sort of in the liminal space between politics and academia. But of course, Bernadine Dorn, if you don't know her, she was in the Weather Underground with Bill Ayers, who was also in the Weather Underground, and they miraculously survived. They're one of the few examples of violent radicals who survived, and they got out on a technicality. I don't know, I've always wondered about that. Like, why did they get to survive and nobody else did? And of course, one answer is they don't have a certain skin color. But then there's also like other characters on here who have made their name more recently. I think you can say Sina Rahmani is one of them, a writer, a figure, kind of in the circles of Nadia Abu al-Hajj. She's at Barnard College. Yassin Al-Hajj Saleh, who's a Syrian writer. So these are all voices that carry a certain weight, kind of in contexts that are beside Iran. Sina Rahmani is Iraqi, yes, and Nadia Bauch, she's Palestinian, of course. So there's they're talking around that, but then you also have these characters like Michael Lowy. I don't know how you say his name, but he's an old guy. Angela Davis. I tweeted earlier, is there a CIA regime change project that she doesn't endorse at a certain point? Albert Toscano, a same one. That these are all luminaries of a certain age whose names used to carry more weight. I mean, in this era that we live in now, I mean, Judith Butler, she's on this. She's on this too. She was a famous Both Sides are early on in sort of October 7th. So we should say at the outset, Robin D.G. Kelly has taken his name off. The other one is Nasreen
Al-Amin. She tweeted this morning.
She's not in this. She's not actually on
Well,
this list anymore.
she was, yeah. Well, maybe
They took her
I
off.
think hers they actually did take off.
Yeah, this is her
but
tweet.
Others were not.
This
She
is her
tweeted
tweet.
this morning.
She
Yeah.
tweeted this morning. She then proceeded to hide her account. I screenshotted this
I
before, so I
screenshotted
feel
it too.
fine. I feel fine sharing it. I don't care. You can hide. It's still there. I don't care. She said, I messed up and my name, I messed up, active voice, and my name was added to a letter that I never read, passive voice. I do not agree with its contents, nor do I agree with the process through which consent for it was gathered. I would never sign a letter drawing a false equivalence between Iran and Israel. Thank you. Nesreen, she follows up by saying, I take full accountability for my own carelessness and causing immense harm by being associated with it. As soon as I read the letter, I withdrew my name. I don't wish to comment more on this except to apologize for my total fuck up. I also never, a minute later, she says, I also never saw a final version of the letter before it went out and was never privy to any drafts. I will be taking this down soon. I wanted my own part for a while. I wanted to own my part in this for a while while I figure out parts that were not my own fault. So and then Robin Kelly said something similar in his message from a boat. He's like on his wedding anniversary. He made a point of, he could have just, Robin, why don't you just text it, bro? You have social. Come on, man.
That was weird.
Just send it. This is not like come on, what are you doing? You don't have to do that. But anyways, whatever.
Let's be honest, Sina, these are not going to be that helpful in recuperating. I'm not in
it's worse.
If I want to talk about Black communist history, I'm gonna talk with Robin Kelly. He's a historian who's done the great work Hammer and Hoe, and his Freedom Dreams, a fantastic book about the Black freedom struggle. So it's not about that, but if you want to be a public intellectual, you want to have political influence and credibility, and let's be honest, these are all very much celebrity, academic, leftist stars, other than say Mumia Abu Jamal, who we should talk about, but at some point. But most of them are left academic kind of stars in the North American Academy. If you want to convert that into social media presence, larger influence, public intellectual sort of thing, you have to be very serious about this. And this is not going to help your case very much. It would have been, I think, much stronger if they had just said, this was a mistake. I remove my name. Yeah. Don't give any excuse about I didn't see quite the final draft. And this is why Leah Boggs posted in the chat very early on a question about how do these petitions get done and pushed and promoted? I mean, there's obviously going to be a whole story there to figure out who actually was trying to get people to sign them. You get these things, usually, what's interesting is that this one wasn't the kind of, wasn't organized in the sort of way where it's circulating on people's emails. Hey, before we go public with this, we want as many people to join, in this, and it's meant for a kind of wide public kind of audience. This was very targeted, clearly, and it was meant for certain people, for a certain kind of audience, and a certain venue. They were going to put it in the Guardian, right? Yeah. So this didn't operate the sort of normal way where I've been kind of told about a petition and that you have until such and such time to sign it if you agree with it, etc. And people who are on it, or people who are promoting it to you, and you make your decision about whether you want to be on it. They made it seem as if they were manipulated into it. They didn't get to read the full thing. And my point is if you are trying to be a kind of political and public intellectual, what kind of credibility do you expect to have if your excuse is, I didn't really read it. I kind of got put my name on. So why would we take you seriously as a political figure?
It's pretty bad.
Why would we take your ideas and thoughts if you're so casual about this, which is not just some, this is about the war of our time, about the anti-imperialist struggle of our time. It's about the genocide, the Holocaust of our time in Gaza, and the way it's linked to this broader kind of imperialist, war in West Asia. If you're just going to toss off your signature on it. Then when you get pushback, and that's what's been amazing, is how incredible the pushback has been immediately, and the overwhelming character of people condemning how stupid this was, how wrong this was. It's because of I would say it's because of the pushback that people are then, trying to come up with some kind of credible story to get themselves out of what is a very damaging kind of situation. So I would have preferred, as you say, a text, and not from the deck of a boat with the beautiful glistening water behind you and saying, well, I don't really have time to get into it, but unfortunately all you plebs have caused a ruckus and a stir about this, so I need to take time away from my vacation and my anniversary to just put a pin in this, and now I'm going back to, my beautiful, wonderful life, and, that this was not the way to kind of like do this if you actually expected to try and put a stop to, the bleeding, the hemorrhaging of your credibility as a serious political figure on the left in the, in the public sphere.
Yeah, and it also raises a question about like, what do these letters do? What does a like this do? Is that at the outset is that it's like a kind of professional disciplining of their own class, and how and I've seen these letters in action, and I have, as a rule, like not signed letters. Now, no one's asking me to sign letters with like rando Sina, but it's happened a few times, and I'm like, I don't do letters. I'm against letters for this very reason, that like it's not 1977. It's not like there's no like that it purports. The whole thing of public letters is that it presupposes the existence of this public square, and the public square is already there. It's called social media. You go there, you say what you need to say, people yell at you, they tell you you're wrong, and then you learn, right? But a lot of academics, they take a distance from that, because criticism of their opinions and the things that they say is like worst, is one of the things that frighten them the most. So they stand at a distance. They use their institutional. And I'm not saying, I don't think Robin did this. I think there's another thing happening in the case of Robin. I think there's different actors in all of this. I think at the end of the day, their name, and this is a sad thing to say, is that like people just don't care all that much of these things.
Yeah,
I think they realize that these letters don't count for very much at the end of the day, that people sign letters all the time and nothing changes, that the U.S. is like a fascistic state that's doing a genocide, that like Palestinians get raped to death in prison on camera by Israelis and Zionists in America boost it, and they signal it, and they say, if you even criticize it, you're going to lose your job. So in that environment, to sign your name to a letter like this, where the accusations are so wacky, and it just tells you that that the person themselves putting their name to it without reading it doesn't really care all that much to begin with, that it doesn't matter at the end of the day, that it's an exercise in kind of weird sort of intra-class, I don't know, solidity. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But then
that's the thing.
What does it mean?
Do these things even matter for anything? I thought this was one of the most wonderful economical tweets by wonderful colleague, anti-imperialist colleague Nazia Kazi. Hollow anti-imperialism. Fighting a literal war against the actual empire. Legit anti-imperialism, being a famous intellectual in the USA. I mean, that just sums it up. It doesn't matter, because the real anti-imperialist fight is happening on the ground. This doesn't change anything. But it's clear that what it's about is that, it's meant to, as you were saying before and as we were discussing, it's really meant to disrupt the political solidarity with, with Iran that is building. I mean, this is what we had. I think a great tweet here also from Charlotte Cates, who, as people should know, is
someone who's actually suffered the consequences of anti-imperialism, by the way.
And
she had her house raided.
For her actual genuine support for Palestinian prisoners.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so this is what's political
Years-long
prisoners.
abolitionist
That's
work,
right.
anti-imperialist abolitionist. And what happened to her? She had her house raided, her bank accounts. They made her life a living hell. So Charlotte, shout out to you. Shout out to all her
Oh,
great work.
Charlotte.
Charlotte
That's
has
right.
done more with one of her fingers than that entire list has done for anti-imperialism. Okay, that's Charlotte's a real one. Support her, follow her. Follow the when we say, I mean, doing you can't support it because it's been so criminalized. I mean,
Yes, it
it just
has.
tells you,
But
but we should
but I
also
mean, that's
mention the
the
fact that
point.
this. I would love to. You could one of those people. Many of the people on that list, their salaries are public. It would be very interesting to do a combined salary of like what it means to be a regime intellectual in the U.S., to be like a dissident regime intellectual in the U.S., and what Iranian intellectuals make. And let's say it would be very interesting to compare that. Some of those people are very wealthy, and they made themselves wealthy through people thinking that they have this vast influence, but in reality,
Well,
they
this
play
is
they play this role of what essentially to me is to like a court jester of the U.S. empire, to like say
yeah.
things but leftistly, at a time when the U.S. I mean, this Gaza exposed everyone. I mean, Al-Aqsa flood exposed some so-called abolitionists for who they are, saying
Well,
things like
decolonial
return the
scholars.
yeah
Decolonial
the whole
scholars,
process,
right?
yeah.
You know, I mean, well, this is the other thing is that clearly one of the targets also was to try and recruit people who are part of the, who are political. They said political prisoner. I don't know who was a political prisoner besides Mumia Abu Jamal on that list, but others who are scholars who are involved in, anti-carceral, anti-racism, abolitionist movements, Angela Davis, Ruth Gilmore, Wilson, etc., to try and recruit them for some particular sort of comparison and equivalence that would undermine and divide solidarity with Iran, right? This is the particular angle and line, and we may find that there will be other boutique sort of, attempts to kind of organize within the community. So maybe something more on like, gender and sexual rights and, so we will see kind of more versions of this, it seems to me. But
Yeah.
that's the point is like, does this stuff really matter? It's just a distraction in some ways? And if we get too caught up with it in some ways, we are kind of wasting time like we did during the Syria situation where like we spent a month or two with no action and no kind of forward movement and progress discussing the, betrayal of Syria, etc., this and all the recriminations that it didn't lead to something. So I would like, before we're done, and there's much more to talk about and other people's responses to get to, but at least to put out there that this is kind of fun stuff to clarify on X and all of that. In the end, the real question and the real problem is why have we not built a genuine anti-war movement that tries to stop the Gaza genocide and the war on Iran? I mean, we have not done that. That's really where we should be putting our efforts. And also, what about, some kind of genuine campaign here? If they're going to do economic war, why are we not focusing on the question of lifting U.S. sanctions? These are illegal. These are totally destructive, to Iran's sovereignty. These are unilateral form of economic warfare on the population. This is collective
It's genocidal.
punishment.
It's
So
genocidal.
it's genocidal. So when they say, oh, we're in solidarity with the people of Iran, not their government, firstly, that's wrong. That's stupid. Recognize the role of Iran's government right now as an anti-imperialist force.
Yeah.
But secondly, if you are in solidarity with the people of Iran, lift the damn sanctions. Build a campaign on that. That should be what you are talking about all the time, is that we don't want collective punishment of the Iranian people, We want these sanctions lifted because it's killing kids, right? So that's, I think, it's also connected to this wider, kind of decolonizing. If you're an anti-imperialist, you are in favor of removing U.S. bases from this region. What is Iran doing? It is destroying, degrading, and making impossible the use of U.S. military facilities designed to control, the Gulf. So let's do that,
Like
You know,
like Iran destroyed. I think it was Bahrain, or is it? I think it was in Bahrain. Iran destroyed one of the like important command and control centers in that place, like a place where the genocide of Iraqis was organized and led. Like these are not insignificant things in world history, and the people behind this letter are desperately trying to get you to not see this. And so there's a good comment here. It says, yes, we can't let ourselves be too distracted by this nonsense. Blow off this steam and then figure things out. There's a truth to this, but however, there's something else in this too, which is this is a moment where we have to reflect on our own intellectual culture. Who are the luminaries of our culture? Where are the organs that they publish in? Why are they so aloof to the sentiments among people as to how they feel that they can just publish these things and have no clue about how it comes off to people, that the moment they get some pushback, they immediately run and say, oh, okay, I didn't mean it. My dog signed this on my behalf. My grandma died 5 times and I couldn't do my homework, so I signed it. Like, this, I mean, I'm sure you're a professor. You've heard every excuse in the book. And like, there's something profoundly cowardly about signing a letter like this and then walking it back and saying like, oh, I didn't mean it. It's like, why? Like then okay, maybe it's true then that the person who was putting this letter out said, oh, we're organizing a letter. If you're interested, let me give me your name, and then never followed up. There is a scenario where that happened. Mumia is now, I mean, 5 weeks ago, we have that tweet, do we? Oh, maybe not. We have the tweet lined up of Mumia wrote he smuggled out a message on paper plates, which Jay published, our friend and comrade, Jay. Do you have them? I can find them. But
I've
basically,
got it,
yeah. So basically, yeah, it's, here, I'll add it to the stage, or just tell me when.
Oh, you already got it.
No, I'll add it. No, is that where you? Okay, you're gonna load it. But basically, he's basically said like he says something to the extent that Evo said that Iran is showing people the way. Iran is showing people the way of how to fight the U.S. empire. And now to turn back and to put his name on this, it makes no sense to me. And I'm sure people who know this scene better, and Jay is one of them. So I'm excited about Tuesday live stream where we can sort of dive more in depth, because this guy they've been torturing this guy for how many decades now, and he's still, 5 weeks ago he was still showing solidarity with Iran and Iranians and recognizing what most of the planet has recognized, which is Iran is doing something so profound to empire that we've never seen, and it's doing it so handily and so effectively that it's inspiring others and providing a roadmap to others. So it's not just that the Gusanos in Iran lost. It's not just that. It's that, oh, here it is. Mumia Abu Jamal, Vijay Prashad published this. I think this is Jay's picture, I think.
I think it is Jay's picture, but I couldn't find... I couldn't find where he posted it, but it was retweeted.
It was 5 weeks ago. It was something like 5 weeks ago. I think Jay said July 15th or 16th in our group chat that this was something that was written out on plates, and I'll read it if you scroll up, Adnan.
Yeah, here it is.
I can't read that one. You have to read the text because it's hard to read. But he wrote them on paper plates for people who aren't watching this.
Okay.
My young
friends, Iran is showing the world, especially the third world, how to fight against the empire. Their drones are rewriting the rules of war, and countries across the global south are studying this phase of the war for that use. They remind me of Vietnam, poor country that whipped the most powerful army on earth. That's where we are today. Love, Mumia.
You're going to tell me he turned around and said they're killing this, and that makes no sense. What, something like, it makes no sense. So maybe what Nasreen and Robin are saying are correct. I'm not saying that they're lying. I'm not saying that. It's that like they weren't shown a final draft, that whoever did this was just a bad actor in all of this, and that person burned their credibility. But it's the fact that what's so insulting is that like the Guardian, that like libs think that we're so stupid, that like we're such dumbasses, that the Guardian, which just recently aided and embedded this horrible fascistic campaign to get this guy to kill himself, so evil that they're turning around and say, oh, we're actually the friend of this random group of of cologne. Like, come on, man. Who are you insulting? Who is this for? It's as if, like, this to me reeks of desperation. I mean, I'll say it again, but it reeks to me of desperation of a class of people who have no clue how to handle the groundswell of support. And this letter is just another coffin in their nail. It's another nail in the coffin of their own project of convincing people that Iran bad, Iran bad, Iran bad. And what's interesting is that there's actors in all of this, Iranian actors, liberal mostly, who have been, I've watched them pull on the regime change rope, if not directly, but in the sense of destabilizing any legitimacy that the Iranian Islamic Republic has by pulling and sort of shoveling the same different coal into the same engine, let's say. And basically saying that, like, oh, Iran bad, who have now, because they weren't, and I think that's what explains what I explained earlier about how they kind of backed off in January and February. And they were, because they recognized that the people who were loudest in front of this were Pahlavoid freaks, and they sort of realized that I don't want any of that heat. So they've now reinvented themselves, and a lot of them are online. A lot of them have blocked me on Twitter because I've given them shit, so I can't say anything to them. But they're basically saying that, oh, Iran, we know you had it in you this whole time. Now they're pretending as if they weren't supporting regime change before. And there's so many strange actors in the Iranian media sphere. There's so much dark money. There's the diversity of the Gusano media class is also something to behold, because you have this class of people, whoever wrote this, you have that class, and they do a lot of work, and they get their names out there, and they're very insidious. But then there's another fascistic class of Pahlavoids and right-wing Zionists, and there's a whole other non-Pahlavoid monarchists. That's even interesting out of all this, that they're monarchists, but they're against Pahlavi because he's such a screw up or whatever. But even now, to the point where they still are pushing Pahlavi as this clown. So he's being brought here by Pierre Poliev, or whatever his name is. I don't even know how to say his name. I've never seen his name. He's being dragged out here like a clown prince. This guy is such a hack. No one likes this guy. He has no constituency. All the money that his family stole from the country is gone. Right? And now all he can do is be supported by various outside actors. And the latest ones are genocidal Zionists. He went to freaking Palestine. He took pictures with the genocidal forces. I mean, Zionists have this thing in them, okay? It's so funny. They have to have everyone kiss their ring in public. Even if it's toxic to them, even if it burns them. So they have to show like in 2000, they have to show that Bahrain is signing the Abraham Accords or whatever. They have to show that, they have to get the UAE to sign there. They have to stand with them. They have to have Erdogan standing with them because, of course, which makes sense because they want to show that, we're a real state too, and we're just like everyone else. And so they got these Sunni vassal states to stand with them. It's very costly. I've seen that picture of Erdogan and Netanyahu many, many times, and that will be his legacy, will be that photo, no matter what he does. I mean, barring some 11th hour change of events, which, is never out of the realm of possibility, but I don't see that happening. But I mean, a lot of these Sunni states have been working hand in hand with the imperialists through America, but also directly through the Zionists to accomplish this genocide in Gaza, even to the point where the Qataris and the Turks convinced Hamas pressured them into this ridiculous ceasefire. Now, you could say that maybe they were out of ammo and they had no choice, or maybe the genocide just took such a toll that they had no choice. But, they used their leverage over them to push them to sign the ceasefire. And you're now in this weird situation where Iran has to use its name over the governments of those countries. And so Iran has to say, we're not opening Hormuz until the Gaza front is peaceful and until Lebanon front is peaceful. We're not opening Hormuz. So Iran has to step in with its leverage. Its leverage is so vast that it has to supersede the national authority of those supposedly sovereign governments that represent those entities. Obviously, Gaza is a special case, but they do have a sovereign government, which is represented by Hamas. They were elected elected and they have those figures there. I mean, how much of it is it left and how much sway it actually holds is a question. But definitely in the case of Lebanon, you have a government in power who are openly signaling to their to their American and Zionist masters, okay, you can do whatever you want, because we're in a situation, the same situation Venezuela, right? Where if the leader is still alive and they're doing the bidding of Americans, there's a reason for that they're still alive. If you don't do the bidding, they will come and kill you, right? And so I mean, maybe a way of ending all of this is, or wrapping it up. It's been over almost an hour, 40 minutes. But there's something in all of this which is like, oh yeah, we should definitely read Helia's article, tweet about this, because it was a great insight. But really, there's something I wanted to say in all this, which is that, like, there is a clip from martyr Khamenei. He's a martyr now. And he said, you know, he was talking about basically the cowardly nature of the Pahlavi dynasty, right? Like, the grandfather tucked his tail and ran. The father tucked his tail and ran. The son, right, the current one, and of course there is no Pahlavi dynasty. They're clowns. They were put in power they were put in power and then taken out of power. His granddad was, at least. The only Pahlavi that ever had any real influence over at a national level. The second guy, I never believed that. He was an absolute monarch who was backed by the U.S., unpopular, chased out of the country. He fled twice, for God's sakes. He had one kingdom and he fled it twice. He fled it during 53 coup, and then he fled it again in 79, right? And then his son, when he was calling for Iranians to murder other Iranians on the street, right, calling out his support, he's saying, no, this is the final battle. He couldn't even go to fucking Qatar. He couldn't even had the courage to go close to Iran to help his own followers, because he knew if he went there, Iranians would murk him out of existence. So there's something in all of this, which is when you're not willing to die. And this is something that Martyr Khamenei himself said. He said, let them kill you. He said, let them kill you. Let them. What's stopping you? And that's exactly what he did. He lived up to his word. And you have to be the most hateful freak in the world, blind to reality, to not see that. Even their enemies say this, that like, yeah, the guy lived up to his promise. He said, yeah, I'll let them kill me. I'd rather die than be taken alive. So I think there's something in all of this, which is there's a lot of Gusano Iranians who, from the safety of the West, talk a lot of shit about Iran, and they talk a big game. And it's for them a very lucrative enterprise, because there's always a career in that from the West, of course. Now, when you risk that is then when you went and do the things that you encouraged other peoples to do, people living in Iran. Now, you could say one thing about the ISIS, the freaks in January who did the bidding. You could say one thing about the people in Iran who, there's lots of traders who would call in to like whatever, to the Iran International, and they say, oh, I'm watching, there's like a video, I'll never forget it out of my head. There's like a young woman recording bombs dropping on her own people, right? People dying. She's recording and she said, oh, this sedai infijar delangiz, right? So she said, oh, the heartwarming sounds of explosions, right? She's filming herself saying that, uploading it to the internet for all to see. The people that she's doing this for publish this for her to get into trouble. And I don't know where she is now, but she was arrested. There was certainly footage of her being like, I didn't mean it. I made a mistake. Like that person's family will have to live with that disgrace, that on camera, this person celebrated the murder of her own people, the destruction of the infrastructure. Because why? Because they watched too much of this? So that to me in all of this is that there is a core of Iranians that have been, their brains so rotted out. But here's the thing. There weren't enough of them to get the job done. There weren't enough of those people who were willing to die to confront other people who are willing to die, right? Which is Iranian state security. They are proving themselves willing to die defending their state, right? So,
well,
this
even
is not
people,
this, yeah.
look, even people in the streets, we've seen through the Muharram, commemorations, we've seen through 100 and what is it now? I don't know, 160, 170, 80 nights. I mean, it's been 6 months, right? So close to maybe 180 nights continuously where people have come out to express their defiance against the American imperial order. on behalf of solidarity for Palestine, on behalf of solidarity with those fighting in southern Lebanon against occupation, Zionist Israeli occupation in southern Lebanon, and have even gone to critical infrastructure when those were threatened to be bombed to go and be human shields for, or to be willing to sacrifice themselves. I remember this guy who was playing his, I forget which instrument it was, but he was playing his instrument on some bridge or in front of some kind of power plant, etc. And he said, I'm just going to be here and defy, if you want to destroy this, you have to go through me. And, it's just a defiant stance. These people have shown and demonstrated that they're willing to sacrifice themselves for their country, but also for others. This is what is so amazing and beautiful about this solidarity that they're teaching to the entire world, is what, like the Cuban people did. It's very few are willing to sacrifice for others. They sacrifice for their nation against the colonizers and so on, but to also be in solidarity and willing to sacrifice for others' freedom, that is truly remarkable and amazing. And we are seeing that, with these people. So it's something that is actually a big lesson, and I think it is very disturbing in many ways for the narratives, the conventional politics. This is what I mean by also this left Islamophobia, is that they just want to make this seem as if this is irrational, this is insane, these are extremist people, their lives don't matter, whereas in fact what they are showing us is the true meaning of human dignity, of solidarity, of willingness to sacrifice for others. These are like the best values. The only values the West is showing us is the willingness to genocide, the willingness to oppress, the willingness to murder and destroy, and so this is really, I think, a very important moment, and it puts pressure upon the conventional political logics that even we lefties especially if we're in the imperial core, have been trained in. This is disturbing stuff. It doesn't make sense in the normal way. So we have to kind of pause and learn a little bit from this moment. And I think also the other thing that I wanted to kind of, come to, because we have been going for a while, is, of course, let's put up Helia's tweet, because it covers some of the ground that I was, interested in doing, and she did it so well here, which is one, the bankruptcy of the Imperial Western Academy and intellectual authority. So I think the point that she makes here is, yes, we can condemn, there's been critiques, but we need to move to a wider understanding of the significance and importance of this. It's more systemic and structural conditions, what's happening in this moment, and what's the direction forward that we should be, working with, like the real knowledge and analysis we should be working with. And that is that, one is this bankruptcy of the Western Imperial Academy. We have seen the critiques and understand how the compatible left has all these connections with deep state, with U.S. empire. But I think even more interesting and important is the way these superstar left celebrity global academics, they're used to having their voice count because they are prominent and big in the imperial core. And they think, even if they're saying they're anti-imperialists or they're in solidarity, that their voice and their opinion should count a lot for the rest of the world. But guess what? Nobody cares. Nobody cares anymore about these people. They've undermined their own credibility, and it doesn't have the effect that they imagine. Second point, I think a very good one, is this condemnation is not politics, right? So we're condemning this, we may have our critiques. That's not enough to be political and to actually make some changes. We can denounce what we have seen, but, we have to go a little further, and actually confront, as she says, the structures producing the violence, right? It allows people to just doing this condemnation. This is a example, this letter is an example of this kind of performative politics and virtue signaling of its own kind. And there's a counter virtue signaling for us to all condemn it and to heap abuse on them and all that. It's important to have a critique and understand, I'm not saying what we're doing is totally useless, but we do need to move on to figuring out what makes and enables this. It is the corporate imperial academy. It is the corporate imperial, kind of social media and activist spaces that have been co-opted and are being used as weapons against us and against genuine solidarity. And we need to confront those actual structures that are producing the violence and not just be satisfied with feeling good about a politics of purity where we distinguish. They are trying to distinguish themselves by saying, we're so kind of consistent and balanced, and we're with the people suffering political prisoners, and we're going to make this intervention right now. And we are pointing out, hey, that's like an outrageous thing to do in the moment where there is an imperialist attack and war, and we have to stand with the Islamic Republic's legitimate resistance against this imperialist system. But it's not just a matter of being right, being correct, being the pure ones. We need to figure out how we are going to mobilize genuine power for change. And one of the things that I think is so problematic with this letter is what I had said before, this allergy of any power, right? And it's equally condemnable. We don't want to fall into this kind of sort of trap. And then the last thing is irrelevance to Iranian political life. And I thought I loved this part. And so I'll read this quickly. Helia says, perhaps the most revealing fact is what has not happened. Okay, so we're obsessed, we're talking about it, but what has not happened is I have been following closely Iranian spaces from inside Iran, universities, classrooms, women's collectives, labor spaces, and political discussions. I have seen no meaningful engagement with this letter. Okay. Its circulation has been overwhelmingly concentrated in English language media and Western political spaces. A letter that appears enormously important in the West has little discernible significance among the people whose lives it claims to address. That gap exposes the distance between the political imagination of the imperial center and the material reality of those living under its consequences. Western subjects may be surprised to discover how irrelevant they have become to the anti-colonial and anti-imperial struggles unfolding beyond the imperial center. Finally, after everything I have lived through over the past 2 years, and especially after talking to Minab families, I refuse to extend the language of good intentions to those who signed this letter. They had decades of history, scholarship, testimony, war, sanctions, intervention, and resistance from which to learn. The future is being made by those who have proved capable of changing the balance of power in favor of the masses of the periphery. History is being made by the resistance forces across West Asia, led by the Islamic Republic of Iran, not through the increasingly irrelevant savior takes of the imperial intellectual class. Let Iran's beauty bless your day. Great conclusion, and pointing out at the beginning, what kind of movements do you have if you're so worried about the betrayals of this kind of a class of people who are so divorced from the actual material conditions and from the actual material forces and movements that are happening, right? So this is what we have to really figure out for ourselves. What do we do to actually be relevant? How would we be relevant? Being relevant is not like these open letters or condemning the open letters. Being relevant is doing things that we can to educate, to organize, to actually be engaged in undermining the capability of the imperial, forces to continue to wage war and destruction upon the people who are mightily fighting back. And in fact, they don't even really need our help, but we could be helpful if we could hasten the end of this. They're going to end it. They're going to defeat the empire, but let's have some dignity ourselves by contributing something to hasten that day of freedom and liberation for everybody in this world. That's what we can do. So where is our movement on that? That's what I would say Helia's kind of point really causes us to reflect on.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I think at the end of the day, the world will move on from the US and in every way possible. And from the Anglophone world in general, that there's a period, like if we really think about when this period started, and if you want to say 1492, like a 500-year long process.
Come on, you're on my program. It's 1095.
I know, it's true. I know. 1095. That's true. It's true. We have to scope it all. But essentially, like a 1,000-year long process of white supremacy and arrogance, a truly kind of Euro arrogance that proclaims itself to be a light upon the world, that it knows better than the rest of the world, and then in reality coming up against its own hubris, and then telling itself these sort of sooth stories, or sort of telling itself these fictional tales of, greatness of this fight or whatever, to soothe its own loss. I think that at the end of the day, that the world is moving on, and the world is tilting towards Asia. Iran is ending up playing a massive role in that tilting. They're helping. It's it's something radical. Just today, they announced this massive gas field, the discovery of this gas field in Iran, as if to flex on the world and say, oh, that magical substance that keeps everything going, that's under our control. You want some of that good stuff? You better be nice and beg to us and not try to wage war on us the way that you have been doing through this genocidal Zio-American war against us. So it's so much bigger than Iranian gusanos. It's so much bigger than some irrelevant letters. What's really, I think the one thing I want to leave on is that it's not so much that these people are ideologically criminal. I don't care what Bernardine Dorn or Bill Ayers or any of these people think about Iran. I don't care. I mean, let's say Sinan Antoon, he's Iraqi. Okay, fine. He's our neighbor. I swear you should know better, but it doesn't matter. What does it matter at the end of the day what some people in the West think about Iran? If that ever mattered, Iran would have been overthrown decades ago. What happens in the inside of our minds far away, right? And in our talks and our things, these don't affect the lives of Iranians. What Iranians decide to do with their futures is what matters. But what's depressing for me is that how these intellectuals are not saying, oh, Iranians, go and rise up. They're saying, hey, you curious 22-year-old grad student who maybe recognizes my name, who checks in with this publication every day, or who may see this letter. Don't go looking into that. Don't look there. There's nothing for you there. There's nothing for you. It's just a bunch of scary bearded dudes who don't look like us, who don't speak in our vernacular, who have nothing to offer you. That's what this is about. This is a big no sign on part of the Islamic Republic saying, no, that's a forbidden, that's the West Wing. You're not allowed to wander into that pardon. And they're policing your thoughts, they're policing your solidarity, but really what they're saying is, I see no interest in this truly radical thing that's unfolding. And I've learned my lesson because a lot of gusanos have taught me that it's really bad what the big bad Islamic Republic did. And I turned off all of my critical faculties because one person at my university told me about their traumas. And this is the eternal game, right? And this is the game that all kinds of actors will play. It's a kind of whataboutism that is very highly developed, and it's aimed at Iran. And it's to keep you cordoned off from learning anything from the people who have led this fight. So here's the reality: is that some of the most influential anti-imperialist, successful anti-imperialist intellectuals and thinking happened in Iran, and it happened by dudes with turbans. And that frightens people in our part of the world, because as you pointed out, Islamophobia is foundational to the way we think here in so many different realms. And radical leftist thinking, anti-imperialist thinking is part of that too. So they're telling you, oh, all of those intellectuals who have been theorizing how to defeat the US successfully, as it turns out, they offer you nothing. I mean, they offer, that's evil. You can't do that. Don't listen to that guy. They participated in this massacre of political prisoners. This is baby-brained logic. This is baby brain logic. Revolutions and states and revolutionary states, they have violence in them. Yes, this violence. There's corporal punishment in Iran. Yes. But you have to assess it on its own merits. You have to assess it in each case study. You have to approach it with a critical mind. You have to say, oh, what are the things that they're charged with? So what happens here? Oh, you get these crazy people who are like murderers celebrated as innocents. They show pictures of them. Oh, just innocent guy. He just murdered 4 of his own countrymen. So like things, and we live in an incredibly violent culture here, which eschews any violence against the sources of that violence. So if you so much as throw a brick in a Starbucks window, you are going to be incarcerated for years to come. Your life will be destroyed, because there's a recognition in that just a little bit of violence can do a lot of damage to a society, which is of course the dual action. On the one hand, they prescribe violence for radicalists in the sort of global south, the troubled part of the global south, such to the point where there were anarchists writing articles in defense of burning mosques, right? Like, imagine if we had people here calling for the burning of synagogues who are supporting genocide. You would be arrested. You would be arrested for that. But in the West, you're given a platform. That's sold to you as critical thinking. I remember it well. It was happening everywhere. You had people demonstrating that, it's normal. This is because they link to the state, and the state is evil. Therefore, anything goes, right? And so there's a whole different set of realities, a whole different rules of ethical gravity that apply to Iran that doesn't apply here, where everything is sacrosanct. Nothing can ever be harmed or touched or confronted. You're not even allowed to say words. They passed legislation that keep you from using words in the most free place on earth, going against the core of their liberal society. So this letter is part of that ridiculous logic. These people who put their names on it are part of this campaign to convince you that the rules don't apply for Iran and Iranians. They're telling you that your critical faculties don't matter, and in fact, you should just take it at our word that you're wrong if you think the Islamic Republic has any liberatory force. So I don't know. I'm someone who's been in this weird position of all these years, not being a gusano, being a full-throated defender of the Islamic Republic, such to the point where I've lost friendships, I've lost support, I've had people call me all kinds of names. I don't care. Go to hell. That doesn't scare me. But it's to the point where you yourself struggle. Like, sometimes you think, am I wrong? Like, am I the enemy here? Like, you sometimes internalize this, but it's of course, the last 8 months I was proven, oh wait, I was on the right side of history the whole time, and I feel great. But in the meantime, there are going to be these actors who have been on the wrong side of history this entire time, who will try to convince you to come over to their side. So just don't buy it. Don't buy into it. Don't listen to these clowns, and, confront your boomer lefty clown relative who sells you this stuff as thing. And I will say one more thing. Please, everyone, I've been bugging you a long time about this, but please, please, please donate to my good friend Mohammed and his siblings. He's going through a rough time. And donate to any charity, any Gaza charity that you deem valuable. It really doesn't matter at the end of the day who you donate to, as long as you just donate. And I will renew people who are hardcore. I will renew this offer. I've only had one person take me up on it. But if you donate a good amount to people, let's say I said before 25, that number is going up. Donate $35 to anyone. $35 to anyone, and I'll give you an annual subscription to my podcast. You'll get all the bonus content. Just contact me. There's different ways you can contact me. You can email me. It's my show. You can get me on social media or whatever, and I will give you that. Just please, everyone, donate. Don't forget Gaza. Don't forget, and if you have other charities you want to boost, let me know. You can put them on, you can post them here. So please, please, please do that. I'm going to post it again in the comments. And yeah, please do that. And I thank you, Adnan, for hosting this. Always good to chat with you. Always good to yell. And it feels good. And fuck the Gusanos. They know nothing. They have no power here. Just laugh at them, mock them. And to those people who signed this letter, man, take your name off of it right away. Apologize. And do your best to learn about Iranian people's struggles. Take them seriously. Iran deserves your solidarity. Iran deserves your critical thinking. Like, you can do it. You don't have to be shamed into like treating Iranians as human beings. Don't do this stuff. So yeah, that's my closing thought.
Excellent. And please do, people go to East as a Podcast, subscribe to that channel,
before it gets banned again.
Before it gets banned, but also, we'll put the link for the fundraiser for Muhammad and his family. I want to also just mention that, we did our bit. Now, we'll talk, and I'm looking forward to Millennials or Capitalism's discussion with a panel and good colleagues who are in, who have more knowledge about like the abolitionist scholarship, about, anti-racism scholarship, etc., who will be able to talk about these figures and their histories and, how to assess all of this. I think it's going to be good. We'll hear some more background about where this may have come through, etc. So much still left that could be discussed, but from my perspective, the best use of this open letter now for me is going to be as a primary source for the week that we're having in my course, Guerrilla History, Anti-Colonial Resistance, History Theory Praxis. In a couple of weeks, we're having a session on the Black radical tradition and the anti-racism struggles and decolonizing in the imperial core, and particularly the role of political prisoners in those struggles and their writings. We're going to read some George Jackson. We're going to have Orasanmi Burton on to talk about his work on the Attica Revolt and other scholars. We're going to have Ashanti Alston, the anarchist panther. I mean, okay, I'm not really an anarchist, but he is a great guy and he has got amazing analysis and experienced political imprisonment in North America and was part of all of those struggles and movements. So that's going to be an amazing opportunity for these students. And I'm going to see what they have to say also about this crazy letter, because who knows about the importance and significance of political prisoners more than the Palestinians in this moment, when every single person knows somebody who was jailed, taken into arbitrary detention, who was beaten, humiliated, tortured in Israeli prisons. Everybody knows someone, has a friend, has a family member. So I am looking forward to that kind of sense of solidarity, analysis on the role of political prisoners. That's where this letter should really have focused on. We're going to see, I think, afterwards, a round of hand-wringing about the extreme left and the way we've pushed back and forced these people into these mea culpas. I hope there are more of them, but there's going to be hand-wringing, and I believe, my prediction is we will see a lot of mainstream compatible left DSA types will come to the defense and aid of, Judith Butler. How could you say this about Judith Butler, about Angela Davis, about, these sorts of people? And they will do this at the same moment that they are throwing BLM, defund the police, the anti-carceral movements under the bus that they are doing right now. So watch out for that. Don't be worried about it. At the very moment when we need to have a movement against the cop cities that are proliferating, rights diminishing everywhere, restrictions upon political speech happening all the time, we are going to see some people come to the defense here and castigate the extreme, left that is like... what's the there's that one podcast where they describe themselves as the what is it? Chap House.
Chapo Trap House. Yeah.
Chapo. What did they call themselves? The something. It's like the rough.
What are they called?
Anyway, you guys know
dirt
what
bag
I mean.
left. The dirt
bag. Yeah, we're the dirt bags. We're not like respectable and civil and all that. They're gonna come after it, and it's gonna mean nothing because these are a bunch of hypocrites trying to kind of reposition themselves. When right now we need absolute solidarity with these struggles inside the imperial core and outside. And I really appreciate, Sina, you coming on, giving us some awesome rants. It was really fun to kind of do this. But now the real work begins, right? This is not just the fun stuff of dumping on these people. Let's get to work. But I really appreciate the chat. Been an amazing kind of chat. There's been close to 450 watching live. This is amazing. Please like this video before
Sunday
you
night.
leave.
Everybody's home.
Everybody's home. Share it, and please subscribe to The East is a Podcast channel before it gets banned again, and also to this one, and also
before you get banned.
Exactly. So please sign up. Either you can join Patreon as a free or paying member, or you can join, I think better is Substack. If you become a member of a subscriber, you can be a free subscriber, you can be a paid subscriber, but Substack allows me to have access to sending you an email or a post. And if this channel does get restricted or banned, or we have to move somewhere else, if you are on Substack and in my community there, we can help recreate the wonderful discussions, community of support, and anti-imperialist analysis together, because I can actually find a way to communicate to you. So go to adnanahussein.substack.com and become a subscriber there. There's some extras and things I sometimes do. You can support this channel, but I really hope, since I'm going to use this in my class, that you will support my fundraiser for students in Gaza. And the link is in the chat and in the description for students taking, the course. Please be generous. I would say again, also maybe the same offer, Sina, if you give 25, well, maybe we should go up to 35 now, but I'm just starting.
35, inflation.
Okay, if you give 35 and send me the screenshot of it, etc., to this fundraiser on Chuffed for the students in Gaza, then, I can make you a full subscriber or a member in Patreon, etc. It's not like there's a lot extra there. I don't tier it.
There's going to be more extras there. If it's up to me, I'm going to harass Adnan into doing more extras. We'll do it. I'll do extras with you exclusively for that channel.
All right. Well, if we do the class, which I mentioned, somebody was saying, oh, what about, I need to learn more about this 1095 you guys are talking about. Well, I am teaching a crusade course this year in the fall, and I am teaching my survey of pre-modern Islamic societies, Islamicate societies, basically West Asia, before the modern world, but beyond just West Asia. It's also North Africa, parts of Africa, into Central Asia. It's a global system, right? It's a world system. Anyway, I'm teaching that course, and I've been pushed by Sina to try and figure out a way to make this more publicly available. So we're trying to figure out a structure where I would record like a lecture, but then if you're a member of my Substack or a member of Patreon, then, we can have a discussion seminar where we go into the details, discussions, we ask questions, we can do close primary source analysis and really get into the nitty-gritties. Everyone could watch the lecture, but then to really get the good analysis that you would want in kind of advancing the narrative into a more kind of textured and deep understanding of the historical forces of the Crusades and their legacies on our modern world, or of the Middle East and Islamic world from its kind of beginnings to the Ottoman Empire era. If you want a foundation in those things, we're going to figure out a way we're going to do it.
I'm excited. Yeah. I'm excited. Ever since my rant about that the other day, people are texting me.
People
like, make Adnan do that course. Make Adnan do the course. I said, I will. I've been pushing him to do it for a year. So
Yes,
now is the
it's true.
time. It's going to be really good. And this stuff is so good. This stuff is so good, Adnan. To you, it's all hat. You're like, I do this every day. But that's to students who don't appreciate you. These are the people who are desperate for this stuff. So please, please, please do it. We'll figure it out. We'll record your courses either at your house or at mine. And we'll just publish them, and it'll be great. And it'll be fun, and we'll do it again.
Looking forward
and,
to it. So
thank
much
you to
to
everyone
come.
who's donated already,
Thanks.
by the way.
Yes, thank you all. Okay, so we're going to get out of here, but again,
2 hours.
thank you all for being here, and thank you to Sina, and
Thank you, Adnan.
Peace with justice and solidarity to you all. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.